About 6 years ago, we started a program in Indianapolis that Brian referenced, and in that time we've worked with over 1,000 police officers and firefighters from our own agency and other agencies, and each one of those individuals that we worked with represents a story. It represents a story of someone in crisis, a family in crisis, friends in crisis, peers in crisis, and there is a lot to be learned from individuals who are in crisis. But the question needs to be asked, because what I've learned in the process of working with that many officers over the period of 6 years is that we seem to have these redundant distresses. Nothing surprises me. And so I don't really understand why we aren't matching resources to need. And so that's what we've done in Indianapolis. But along the way, we've created a culture where it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to ask for help. Your job is not going to be affected. You will be supported by the organization. Now, with support, along with support comes accountability. If you don't have accountability with support, then it's really just enabling. And this is where most peer support programs or programs that attempt to do wellness fail. So we're going to start off with a little understanding of what it is we do in Indianapolis and some of the myths that we believe in our profession and the roadblocks, the stumbling blocks that get in our way. And before I begin, I would tell you that I have a wonderful staff and I wouldn't be able to do what I do without those people. Albert Einstein is famous for having said insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Isn't that what we expect in law enforcement? We're still hiring recruits in this generation. We're hiring Generation Y, millennials, that we hired my generation, the Vietnam and Korean War vets. And the interesting thing about the mistakes that we make is that we're one of the most vetted professions in the history of professions, and yet our people are still suffering. We're losing 2 to 6 times as many officers to their own hand, to self-harm, as we are to those that we're losing in the line of duty or to felons. And yet our focus still is on the safety part of safety and wellness, and I'm not arguing that point. We need better equipment. When I first started, you were miserable when you got home at the end of a shift when you took off your vest because it was so cumbersome. Now we have lightweight vests, we have holsters that have quick release, we have tasers, we have the latest type of CS repellent. We have wonderful advances in tool making and in tactics. But what are we doing about the crisis that we face, the experience of doing law enforcement for 20 or 30 years to pension? What are we doing about the breakdowns that occur in our people over the course of their careers? You see, this is who I want to be. Many of you don't know, I'm retiring. January 29th is my last day, 33 years in law enforcement with the city of Indianapolis. And I want this to be me. I want to be on a warm beach somewhere with somebody I love, nothing in my closet heavier than a pullover, and having a happy look on my face like this. Now, I give you that this is an ad I stole from Viagra ad. So there's a reason why there's a reason why they look really happy. But this is who I want to be in my golden years. But this is who I see, and I work very closely with retirees. And those of you that have family members who have retired or you know recent retirees, many of them are miserable. And they're miserable for a lot of reasons. Some of the reasons are they have physical health issues. I mean, I've had 2 knee surgeries, shoulder surgery, foot surgeries. I've had all kinds of things done. It's just the career takes its toll on you. And so we are physically disabled in some ways when we start our retirement. We don't qualify for Medicare or parts of Medicare because we haven't paid into Social Security because we haven't paid into a pension. And because we haven't paid into a pension, we're not probably going to receive Social Security unless we had outside income. Pension split, that's not a good thing like a stock split. A pension split means you're not finishing your career with the same person in bed next to you that you started your career with. And so they got a really good attorney, and so you're probably going to stick around because at retirement you're only going to get a half or a third of your pension. Health-related issues, anger, depression. A lot of retirees are dealing with anxiety, depression, obsessive-compulsive behavior, bipolar issues, some treated, some not treated. And the way to inquire of retirees if they're happening is to just ask them questions. Go to retiree luncheons or pick out some retirees and say, hey, are you happy in your retirement? Because many aren't. Kate mentioned spiritual health. We're not spiritually grounded as a profession. Out of the 1,000 officers I've worked with very few who are struggling, who are spiritually grounded, whose family is spiritually grounded. So I'm not going to beat a dead horse, and I'm not going to stand on a pulpit and preach to you, but just consider that for a moment. So Kevin Gilmartin in this book, and Brian's going to ask me, to recommend a book, and this will be the first book that I would read, is Kevin Gilmartin's book, Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement, if you haven't already. Kevin asks about the journey. We know what's going to happen. Can we make this journey any easier? So I'm going to talk about my own personal journey, and that's me in the second row there with that 80s porn mustache. So I don't want to hear you picking on me when I'm done. But in January of 1984, 25 recruits started, 24 classmates and myself. And so we had a 30-year reunion a couple years ago, and we created this ledger. And this is what we came up with from our class. 1 suicide, 1 in federal prison, 1, we don't know where this guy's at. 15 divorces out of 25. 47 suspension days, 5 DUIs, 1 cocaine arrest. Now, our joke after a few more rounds of cocktails was this was all the same guy. So that made it easy for us to digest. But on a not-so-funny note, we also took a ledger accounting of those officers we've lost along the way, and we're right on the national average of officers that we're losing to their own hand versus those we're losing in the line of duty or to felons. So how do we become resilient? We've heard this theme. Dick Donahue brought it up. Kate brought it up. We've talked about the theme of resiliency. And as Kevin Gilmartin asks, how do we survive? Because Kevin says, look, you're going to either go through your career and finish your career as a survivor or a victim. So how do you see yourself? What separates victims from survivors? For me, it's this idea of baggage. And this is what I've come up with. Again, this is evidentiary based on my work with the number of officers that I've worked with. And what I've found is that there's 2 kinds of baggage. The baggage we bring to the job when we're hired, and we all do. There's no way around it. We all are dealing with some type of demon in our life. And we're going to talk about, I call it default programming. Like I said, we're the most over-vetted profession, but we still somehow sneak in with some things that we're carrying, some baggage we're carrying. And then the second type of baggage is that we pick up along the way in our 20 or 30 years of the law enforcement experience. So some of the areas of default programming, low self-esteem, married young, sexual, emotional, physical abuse, incest in the household, mild to extreme narcissism. If you're not a narcissist, before you enter into this profession, the first time you put that uniform on and look at yourself in the mirror and think, and usually we're looking at ourselves in the mirror with only the vest and the shirt on. We have our underwear on and the gun belt. And so we start thinking a lot of ourselves, a childhood history, especially with the millennials. We jokingly refer to them as the ADHD generation, and statistics will bear that out, that they have a higher incidence of behavioral disorders than previous generations. Addictive behaviors, immaturity, impulsivity, all of these things. Now, I'm not saying that if you're some of these things, you can't be successful in our career. I'm some of these things. Brian Willis is all of these things, which is amazing. It's amazing that he was able to get through his career. But the serious part of this baggage is it's like a boat anchor, and you're trying to swim in the ocean and survive. And you may be able to swim for a while and dog paddle or do the backstroke, but eventually if you don't do something about what you're struggling with, it's going to weigh you down and take you under the surface. And then it's only natural that if you're a damaged person or you're not coping with what you bring to the table when you're hired, that what you experience in your career is going to weigh you down, and it's going to magnify what you were hiding when you were hired. And we all hide those things because we don't want anybody to think we're weak in our profession. That's why it's so important for the culture to change. We have to be able to say, hey, I'm weak. I had a sergeant call me up and say, hey, I'm dealing with an officer. He told me he's on Prozac, and what do I need to do? Do I need to do a fitness for duty? Do I need to take him out of work? Do I need to put him on a desk? And I said, no, you need to worry about the 5 on your shift that need to be on Prozac and aren't. I mean, we focus on the wrong people. We're focusing on the people that are trying to get healthy, that are being proactive, and we're ignoring the ones who are, that are hiding it, that are hiding what their challenges are. So we've broken the challenges in our career down to these 5 areas. Addictive issues, whether they're substance abuse issues or process addictions like gambling, mental health, brain-related issues are a challenge to our officers. General health issues, we all deal with diet, nutrition, exercise challenges, working shifts, getting up for court. Personality behavior issues, especially this idea of victimization. When I survey police officers, 1 out of 2 claims to be a victim of something that their department has done to them, and they're still carrying that baggage with them. Remember this. Put it in your tank, not your trunk. If you're carrying something with you, this is my problem with retirees. I'll meet with them and they'll tell me a story about that sergeant who did something to them, back when Reagan was president, and they're still carrying that baggage with them. Why? Get rid of it, dump it, put it in your tank, let it fuel you, but don't be a victim. The control and anger are so closely related. We're so used to controlling everything. We're taught in the academy, you need to control the scenes, and then we try to control things at home. We try to control things at a Little League game, right? And it makes us angry, and we don't know how to deal with that anger. Family relationship issues, they're not last because they're least important. They're last because that's the foundation, as Kate and others have mentioned, Brian, into surviving your career. You have to create partnerships at home. So when I do law enforcement surveys, these are the numbers. And you can say, wow, that's high. You must be dealing with a lot of sick people. But I'm telling you right here and now that this is your agency and your people. 1 out of 5 officers dealing with an addictive challenge. 1 out of 4 dealing with a mental health, behavioral health issue. An inordinate number dealing with general health issues. Personality, ego issues, 1 1/4, and the relationship issues depend on how I word the question, anywhere from 25 to 70%. And what did I say earlier? That's the foundation for us getting through our careers. Now, if you have relationship toxicity at home, I've got to deal with that if I'm dealing with an officer who's in trouble before I can deal with the other issues. So what do you think I'm dealing with most of the time? Family issues. So how do I know these numbers are accurate? Because when I go on the road and I teach about 100 days a year, I do this thing with sticky Post-it notes. I don't replicate the survey, but I do this thing with sticky notes, and this is what I do. And you can see there's my 5 categories. This was a leadership academy a year ago. Look at that family toxicity at that leadership academy. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to start doing recruit classes. I'm going to start looking at recruit classes because they got to be healthy people, right? I mean, I'm 55 years old. I've earned the right to screw up my family, but these people are 25 years old. I mean, they should be coming from healthy environments. First of all, look at the mental health issues, and then look at the toxicity at home. Bankruptcies, physical abuse, emotional abuse, divorce, and they're just starting their career. Are they going to make it 30 years when they're already in the academy and they have this history? That's the question we need to ask. What can we do about it? So we really break down the foundation of what we need to accomplish and what we need to teach people from the day one of their career to deal with creating partnerships at home, because we have very complicated families, don't we? The families are getting much, much more complicated. We also need to address the issue of stress. Robert Sapolsky is an endocrinologist who studies animals in the wild, especially the relationship between zebras and the lion. Lion chases zebra, lion either catches zebra and eats it, or a zebra lives to run another day. But the amazing thing about the zebras with the smallest brain in the animal kingdom is they don't stress it. They don't come back and say, oh, we need to call an alarm company and put an alarm in. We need to build a moat. We need to put up a fence. We need to do this, that, and the other thing. They're like, you know what? I'm good. He'll be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. and I'll worry about it then. But what do we do as humans? We stress everything, and 99% of what we stress never comes to pass. And what are the manifestations of this stress? Sleep disorders, weight gain, insomnia, alcohol, drug use, migraines, stomach issues, irritability. Right? I mean, how many of you are taking medications for those things? And they're all related to stress. And Dr. Shute, a very famous psychiatrist who I work very closely with, says, hey, Brian, remind them, stress is not a circumstance. Stress is your response to that circumstance. I get pissed off when I stop at a gas pump and I pay at the pump and I get that message, see attendant for a receipt, right? I mean, I'm like on 9 in a row of those things. And then you look inside the gas station, there's people and they're in line buying their Red Bull and their lottery tickets and their cigarettes, or they're just hanging out talking to the attendant, and you're thinking, I'm not going to go stand in that line. That's why I paid at the pump. And I get angry about that, or I'll get stressed out about it. And I realize that stress is my response. It's not, I mean, God is testing me or something. I don't know. That's what I've kind of narrowed it down to. So I asked officers in a survey, and over 50% said, yeah, we've experienced symptoms of overwhelming stress. And the problem with overwhelming stress is it leads to distress. And distress is costly to an individual, and it's costly to organizations. And I have my 3 rules of distress in working with the number of officers I've worked with. First of all, it's immediate. Now, that clock says 3 o'clock. That's not 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because officers will call you up, and they won't call you up, and they'll say, hey, you got a couple hours free on Thursday afternoon because I'm going to have a meltdown, and I would like to come in and see you. No, it's the Super Bowl is getting ready to kick off. You're ready for your daughter's bar mitzvah. You're getting ready to unwrap presents on Christmas Eve. How many of you are in peer support? You know what I'm talking about. They go into crisis at the most inopportune times. right before the holidays, I will get hold of all my crisis cases, and I will say, have you been to EAP? Are you talking to somebody? Are you current? Are you proactive? How are things at home? Why? Because I don't want them to go into crisis when I'm trying to spend time with my family. But inevitably they do. And why is that? Because they're not doing things proactively to keep themselves healthy. So the problem with distress is that it leads to serious consequences. We've all seen these statistics, so I'm not going to beat you over the head with it. But when I survey officers, this is what they tell me. 1 out of 5, 1 out of 6 has thought about harming themselves during their career. Now that has very serious implications, and we know the statistics. And it's, we think that it's PTSD. We think, oh, well, we're dealing with trauma. We went on a run, 7 people dead in the house, because that's a run I've been on. 4 of them under the age of 12 had their heads blown off. And we've all seen and experienced things like that, and we think, well, that builds up after a while and we can't deal with it. Look, there's very few trauma-related disability cases. Now, some of that has to do with the fact that pension boards aren't really set up for that, but in Indiana, they're pretty favorable. And we don't have that many. People with trauma can get healthy enough to come back to work and be serviceable and live with their trauma and be good parents and husbands and wives. So it's not trauma, and there is an element of mental health to people who are taking their own lives, but we're really misled about what is causing our people to harm themselves. And it comes back to these 2 themes that I've been harping on, that we've been harping on all day, and that is relationship and family, and finances being a part of that. 92% of us still live paycheck to paycheck, I think is what My Money Wellness has quoted. And then the other thing is this overwhelming stress, something that we have control over. Our reaction to situations is what's causing us harm. And this is what I've learned about individuals who have harmed themselves and have been successful, and then those who haven't, is that it's us in the middle of our career, typically male, military background in some cases, single, very stressed and self-focused, loss of control. They just feel like they don't have any control over their life. They're making poor choices. But the biggest thing here is the esteem and self-worth. You see, we get ourselves into relationships where we are so invested in that relationship. That's good, you want to be invested in a relationship, but we're unhealthily invested in that relationship. So when that relationship is challenged, it is an attack on our self-worth. So I want you to think about that for a moment. If you've got somebody that comes into work and says, found out my spouse is cheating on me, or things aren't good at home, you need to take them seriously. These days of allowing somebody to self-medicate or put your arm around them and say, kid, we all have 3 divorces, those days are over. Those days are over. You see, because coping and pain, you put coping and pain on an X and Y axis, and this is what happens when they cross. You're in that death zone. You're in that crisis zone. So we need to reduce pain, and we need to increase people's ability to cope, and we do that through stress inoculation. We do that through resiliency. And resiliency has to happen at home and at work, because what happens at home we bring to work, and what happens at work we bring home. And we practice resiliency, and it helps us adapt, and it helps us cope. And how do we do that? By developing healthy habits and making quality choices and controlling things in our life. Instead of trying to control things at work, control things you have control over, like saving for your kids' college. There are all kinds of studies that show this is the right thing to do. Saving money, University of Delaware study that said morale is better, productivity is better, behaviors are better, absenteeism is lower if you show as an organization that you care about your people. I started with an Einstein quote, so I want to finish with an Einstein quote. Einstein says, only a life lived for others is worth living. And I really believe that he's talking about the nobility of policing. We do noble things. We deserve to have people stand up for us and represent us. So I leave you with a play on a Chinese proverb. Napoleon said, a leader is a dealer in hope. It doesn't matter what rank you are or what insignias you wear on your collar or on your sleeves. We're all leaders when we put on that uniform. And we should be instilling hope into our people. We should be planting the seed of a tree that we may never sit under that shade, but the next generation will. So that's the challenge to you today, is can you leave here and can you set your vision? Can you think big and dream big? And so, again, people who think small normally accomplish small things. So my challenge to all of you is to leave here with big dreams, because I think if you dream big, you'll be able to accomplish big things. I wouldn't have thought in my last year in policing all these things would happen to me. A visit from the Attorney General, appearing in front of Congress and testifying on law enforcement issues, receiving a major grant from the BJA. But I dreamed big. And these things can come to you if you're willing to do that. Thank you very much for your time. I'm honored to be here.